You all know that the Pasha of the week, we have two Pashas, as a matter of fact, Matoss and Massey. And therefore there is enormous amount that can be spoken about. But we will focus actually on Massey for a moment. You did not get to Massey yet, but many of you probably remember it from last year. Massey means the journeys. And the Torah is there enumerating, almost listing, the various journeys, the various places that Eden visited, so to speak, during their journey from Mitzrayim all the way till they came to the Yarden. With the Yarden, of course, the Jordan River is what separates Eretz Yisrael from the outside. And then they had to cross the Yarden, enter Eretz Yisrael, which actually took place after Moshe Rabbeinu's passing, and Yeshua is the one who actually crossed the Yarden with the Yidden. So the Torah, I said, enumerates, lists all of these journeys. And the way the Torah refers to these journeys, it says, Eile Massey Bnei Yisrael, these are the journeys of Bnei Yisrael. Asher Yotzu Me'eretz Mitzrayim, as they left the land of Mitzrayim. So this is a very common question that many commentators speak about, and Chassidus speaks about extensively. And that is that leaving Eretz Mitzrayim was only one journey. Not all of these journeys. There were 42 different stops that Eden took during this entire trip. And as you will learn in Mitzvah Hashem, there were many journeys that were proceeding in a certain direction, going towards Israel, and in many cases they had to actually retrace their ways and come back and then go back again. Various causes that caused this. And all of this, the Torah refers to, that these are the journeys leaving Mitzrayim, coming out of Mitzrayim. And our Rabbeim and Chassidus ask this question, why are all these journeys described as steps of getting out of Mitzrayim? In fact, they got out of Mitzrayim the first trip. When they first got out, Ramses, Sukeso, that was out of Mitzrayim. And generally, you see, it's explained that getting out of Mitzrayim is a long-term effort. It is not enough to get out of Mitzrayim geographically, which means just plain in terms of the earth, of the land mass. Mitzrayim was not the problem with Mitzrayim. What Eden was striving to get out of Mitzrayim was not so much of the land of Mitzrayim, but it is to get out of the influence of Mitzrayim, the mentality of Mitzrayim, the subjugation of Mitzrayim. And the subjugation of Mitzrayim, as we will discuss, this is something which requires many steps. And as a matter of fact, Chassidus explains that we are still getting out of Mitzrayim. As long as we don't have the final redemption, we are still getting out of Mitzrayim. How so? And this is what we want to discuss. There are many stages of getting out from a certain condition. And I will explain it using an analogy, an allegory which we use many times. Chassidus explains in the Torah, in Tanakh it's mentioned, that the human being, the primary quality of a human being is that he is a mehalech. Mehalech means that he is in a state of walking. In contrast to an oimed, who is in a state of standing still. The Malachim in the Nach are described as oimdim, standing still. Human beings are described as mahalchim. Now, Malachim are standing still. What does it mean they're standing still? Malachim are not standing still, they're all over the place. And the Gemara describes a malach, covers the entire move from one end of the world to another in one hop. And malachim also can increase their realization and understanding of godliness and so forth. It is not that they're standing still in the simple literal sense. What then is the standing still concept as attributed to malachim and contrasted against the human being or the yid who is not standing still, who is a mahalach? So you use the following analogy. Let us say somebody is climbing up the Empire State Building. And as he's going up higher and higher, he can then have a further view, a bigger, a longer view. The further up he goes, the further out he can see. Up until when he reaches all the way up, he can see way out, tens of miles at a distance. With all this climbing up, with all this viewing and projecting and experiencing this tremendous sight, he has not moved an inch. He personally has not moved an inch. He is still bound to the same spot, and he is bound to come down ultimately, all the way to the ground, and go back to where he started from. He hasn't moved an inch. It's an amazing thing. Tremendous experience, going up so high and seeing so far in a distance, and recognizing all the various sights and so forth. And he personally has not budged, has not moved an inch. Take this analogy and translate this in terms of a human aspect. It is possible for a person who is intelligent and smart to accumulate an enormous amount of knowledge. Take it right from the beginning. He learns a Chumash, and he is not a stupid man, and he says, "Breishis bara Elokim hashamayim v'ha'aretz." In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, you ask him now, who created the heavens and the earth? Oh, of course, God created the heavens and the earth. Then you turn around and say, who is the world belong to? Well, it belongs to me, it belongs to this guy, it belongs to that Turk, to that. Well, you just learned, God created the heavens and earth. Oh, wait a second, I never thought of it this way. I learned about it. It's a historical factor, but who it belongs to. It belongs to, this piece of earth belongs to this one, this belongs to this one. I haven't really applied it in practical terms at all. In other words, this is a very simple illustration of the most profound thought that one can learn especially in our day and age. In our day and age, this sentence hits, so to speak, the core of the mentality of the age. The mentality of the age is that the world was created how? Big Bang. And the human being evolved from a monkey. Hi, monkey. And then you learn this statement. You know, God created the world. Not only does it not immediately translate in a complete reversed view of what the world, where the world comes from, so to speak, but what the world stands for. The big difference between the Big Bang and the godly creation is not day and night. It's a complete, one is totally negating the other. It's not a difference in quality, it's a negation of one and the other. A godly creation has a significance, has a basis for existence. There is an owner. A Big Bang is a total accident. Who cares what happens there? And everything in the world, everything that resulted in the Big Bang is all, one thing is clinking, is in conflict with everything else. It's a big discussion in that particular area. But clearly, it's a totally different view of the world we live in. The world we live in and the life that we are pursuing. Totally different vision. And yet, it's possible for a person to learn this pasuk and the following pasuk, and the following pasuk is speaking about everything that God created in the order in which it was created, all the way into Shabbos, all the way, everything, and he knows to relate everything that the Torah says, and he is at a standstill. Mentally, and in terms of his personal orientation, he hasn't budged. This is called an oimed. It's like a person piling up rocks one on top of the other and climbing up and down. He doesn't budge. In contrast, what is a mahalach? A mahalach means, the word mahalach means walking. Now, walking is a very slow process. If I want to see what's doing a mile away, it's infinitely more rapid, more accessible, more faster. Just to go up a few steps and I see what's a mile ahead. To actually walk a mile, it'll take me, 20 minutes. In 1 minute, I can see way further. And yet, we all can readily understand the difference. That when you walk that mile, you're actually there. You got there. You actually not only see from a distance what it is, but you are part of it, you're experiencing it. You become acclimated into it, you become part of it. It's a completely different phenomenon.
Through walking, you become part of it.
Through walking, by getting there. Right. Now, walking is a slow process. Everybody knows walking is a slow process. And I want to discuss and analyze the process of walking. It'll sound like, what are you talking about? Everybody knows what walking is. But it behooves us to focus in and understand, particularly as it translates and it pertains to what we call spiritual walking. Walking takes place, occurs in the following way. we stand on one spot, we stand in a certain spot. Then we decide, okay, I want to walk, which means I want to take a step. And how do I take a step? I have to be somewhere. I cannot be in a vacuum. I cannot be nowhere at all times. Which means I have to be, since I'm here, until such time that I transfer myself to another place, I have to be here. This is my solid base. So how do I walk? I remain anchored over here, where I am. With one foot, I remain in my anchor, in my base. And I stretch out my other foot in front of me. And as I stretch it out to the other place, I kind of test the ground in the next location. It's solid, I can really put my foot there. So I put my foot there, and then I bring my other foot to meet the daring foot, the Marines, so to speak. Right? I send the Marines out, and then say, okay, now you can come and join me. This is not allegorical. This is a very important process. Because in order to bring the other foot to join the Marine foot, you have to make a decision that I am totally and completely dissociating from the original place where I was, and I'm establishing base over here. And that requires a lot of daring, requires a profound decision and conviction and ability to move and to change and to transfer from one place to the other place. This is why walking is slow pace. Because if you are going to take too big of a step, you won't be able to bring the other foot to join. Physically, this we all understand, but mentally it's very difficult to make a change of such a quantity, such a dramatic change that I cannot see even the place where I came from. The way we do it is we make a small step, and then, yes, I decided this is good, and I look back and say, what did I leave behind? It's okay, I can leave that behind. But if I go too far and I cannot see what I left behind, then I'll have constant trepidations. Did I do right? What am I missing? This is describing the process. Physically, this is what walking is. And walking requires that when you take a step, you feel solid in this new place. Otherwise, you cannot proceed further. Translated in the human process, when we say the human being is a walker, we don't mean he walks with his feet. It means that he is in constant growth and transferring himself spiritually from one place to another. His orientation, his intellectual focus, intellectual base. Then there is definitely this challenge. And as a person progresses, he has to progress in small steps. Because if he progresses in large steps, then he cannot establish a sound base, and then, God forbid, he can fall back. This is why the Torah says that the Massey, the journeys in leaving Egypt, even Jewish people were entrenched in Egypt. They were both subjugated. They were all born slaves, so to speak, in the subjugation. They were subjugated in the worst possible way. And they were also totally imbued, totally encompassed by the culture of the place. And leaving that required to be a careful movement. Because if it is not a careful movement, then you will not really properly leave it. And here's the point that we need to understand, the definition of the word leaving Egypt. Leaving Egypt does not mean I'll leave it and I'll come to visit you tomorrow. Leaving Egypt means that I have nothing left behind there. I have no connection to it whatsoever. I cannot associate with it. I can't relate to it. This is what it means to leave Egypt. And in order to accomplish that type of move, it has to be what the analogy is called walking. Where you walk and you don't feel the trepidations on making the step, because you know what you're going away from, and you know where you're going, and you're not concerned. In contrast, there is a third state, a third category that is described. And the third category is called hopping, jumping across. Now, in fact, it's an interesting thing. When Eden left Egypt, at that point, they actually were described as posach. What's posach mean? Hopping across. They actually walked out of Egypt not in a manner that they were prepared for it, and they were actually acclimated with each step as they left Egypt, acclimated to the new environment. They just simply ran away from it. They ran away from it. This was kind of breaking away in a sudden manner that is more properly described as jumping out. Now, jumping out is a wonderful thing, because when you jump, clearly you cover much more ground and much more quickly. But there's a problem with jumping. Yes, indeed, you jump across and you're much further out, but you haven't really covered all the ground that you were skipping. And when you don't cover all the ground that you're skipping, you constantly feel that, how did I get here? I know where I am, but how did I get here? It's not real. And if I don't know how I got here, then being here is not real. And this is in fact what happened. As Eden left Mitzrayim, the truth is that leaving Mitzrayim had to be done in this manner, for reasons that we will maybe discuss, and he will learn in Mitzrayim. It had to be done in this manner. But the fact was that even throughout their journey in the desert, almost throughout the journey, for a long time, they were constantly reversing back and saying, let's get back to Egypt. Are you going back to Egypt? What was Egypt? Because the leaving for Egypt was not in a manner that was gradual. It was something that they were able to acclimate as they went. It took them a long time. 42 journeys. Ultimately, at the very end, as a matter of fact, as you all know, a very important point, that generation that left Egypt never entered the land of Israel. They could not make the full break. They never entered the land of Israel. They remained in the desert. Despite all the miracles, despite the fact that they witnessed and they experienced the splitting of the Red Sea, they witnessed they ate the man, they saw the miracle of the well, they participated, were present, and they saw the Matan Torah and all that. It didn't happen. Their children, they were able to go into Israel. That's, I'm sure you know, this is something which is recurringly mentioned in the Torah. So there is much to speak about the actual journey from Egypt and Mitzrayim and so forth. But as we said, the most important element in this discussion is how does that translate in our own lives, which is extremely, extremely important. Because here, we are here in Yeshiva, each one of us, as I mention all the time, at an adult stage of life. We're not little children that can absorb like children absorb, and they like the children in the desert, right? They grew up on this, on the man, and then that's all, they absorb it internally, and they become part of the Jewish orientation. We all start at an adult stage. Number one, we all experienced Egypt. We all experience a completely different view. And in order to get to Matan Torah, in order to get to Eretz Yisrael, we have to move away, dissociate from this other view. They cannot coexist. They completely cancel each other out. They have to dissociate from the other view, and we have to adapt to a new view. And we have to adapt to a new view in a very clear and decisive manner. We have to understand what this is about. Even though we remain, so to speak, in a physical world, and the physical world lends itself, from a physical perspective, to be interpreted in a way that is completely different than the Torah view. The only way we can interpret the physical world in the Torah view is by applying the view that our neshama provides. That the soul, that the emunah, the insight that we have from our neshama, this is what that describes what makes it possible for us to see the world in a different manner. Bereshis bara Elokim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz. That the principle that God created Shemayim v'Oretz, if we should take this as a factual reality, not as a historical, just a nice fairy tale, we have to have recognition of the reality of God. Where do you see God? It is the human soul, and particularly, of course, the Jewish soul, that says that God is the only reality. And if there is anything else, it has to come from that reality. And as we said, this is total reversal of the Mitzrayim view that we come from. We're all exposed to it. and we have to deal with it in a walking manner, in a manner that we can actually relate. We can go back and say, I have no trepidations, letting go of that view. Because I have a new insight, I have a new sense of reality, and that is the reality to which I subscribe, to which I can relate to. And that takes many, many, many steps. This is not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens in big steps and big hops. It is something that needs to be personally, very carefully examined. And the movement has to be solid, has to be well acclimated. One principal way that this change, this step over occurs, can happen, is when we begin to actually define the things in the world that we are experiencing. In other words, if we're going to start talking historically, it's insignificant. We can be convinced and convinced and convinced, and then we fall right back, because if we are entrenched in the physicality of the world, there's no way that we're going to see it automatically different. But because we are human beings, because that we have neshamas, we are able to focus in and see the world and see in the world itself a completely different quality than worldly. If we focus in on the world, we actually can see a godly quality in the world itself. The more we recognize this, the more we focus in on that, the closer we become to the Torah view, and the further we move from the meaningless world view. And this takes a lot of effort, and it takes many steps. This is Massey b'nei Yisrael. He even had many journeys before they even came to receive the Torah. Matan Torah. Matan Torah was enormous revelation, was thunder and lightning, and they saw godliness with their own eyes, and yet it took many journeys, even that they should be able to stand there and receive the Torah. And then afterwards, what happened within 50 days of that, a complete reversal. After having seen it. Which means that it's incumbent upon us here to actually focus in. What am I learning? What does this mean to me? How does this contrast with the view that I am accustomed to? How do I reconcile it? Why do I relate to it? There has to be something personal brought to bear over here. Just to study, so to speak, know the piece of information and be able to answer a test question is insignificant. That's not for us here. in actual truth, there is an expression that the Rebbe used, especially the very last years. The Rebbe used the expression, open your eyes. Open your eyes. You heard it, I don't know if you were. Open your eyes, the Rebbe said, and you will see that the Geula is here already. That was the Rebbe's expression. Open your eyes. What is the meaning of the expression, open your eyes? Who walks around with closed eyes? Everyone walks around with open eyes. We have discussed many times, and I want to revisit that concept, just as one concept of many. But again, the focus, the point of it is that we should all find it in ourselves, in our own intellect, to be able to identify and to see that there is more to the world than worldliness. There's something superworld, there's something which is higher than the world, something godly in the world. What is the principle of open your eyes? So we discussed many times the phenomenon of sight. Sight really is a phenomenon. What do I mean by the word phenomenon? It is something which really, it's in the world, and we actually experience it on a daily basis. But it has a superworldly effect. It's something that kind of stumps us. What am I referring to? What is superworldly effect of sight? The definition of a worldly effect is what's called cause and effect. Cause and effect. Cause and effect means that this cup will not move unless it's pushed. And if you see it moving, you know that something pushed it. That's cause and effect. And if I feel the table in my hand, I know that I feel the table in my hand, not because it's true that the table is there and my hand is here, because if my hand is here and the table is here, I don't feel the table. They're equally true. But I feel it only because there was a cause for feeling it. It disturbed my hand. It hurt me. So I know it's there. Right? This is the general worldly experience of things. And all interactions in the world on the worldly level, on a scientific level, is based on this phenomenon. One thing pushes the other, and therefore we know, therefore it happens. How does a car move? Does a car move? Does a car know what it means to move? Zero. Everybody knows that a car doesn't move. There's a motor that causes the wheels to spin. And when the wheels spin and they put them on the ground, so the ground, the wheel pushes against the ground and therefore it moves. Friction. The car doesn't know what it means to move. Who knows that it moves? The human being knows that it moves. God doesn't know the difference. This is the worldly level of existence. Exclusively cause and effect on the most mundane, lowest physical level. There's an exception to that. And I would like you should focus in, try to experience it. There's an exception to that. And the exception to that is sight. In sight, you know that this object exists without ever coming in contact with it. Without ever being affected by it. Without it having any kind of specific meaning to you. There's a particular unique quality in the human soul. We see the world, and lahavdil, the animals see the world. They also have eyes. But there's a fundamental difference in how what the animals see, how they see the world, and how we see the world. The animals see the world almost identical to the effect of touch. Whatever they see the object in terms of how is this reflect to me? My common expression is, the animal, when it sees an object, it sees, am I going to be his lunch or is it going to be my lunch? It's a direct effect. Only the human being is capable, and this is what defines a human being, that he sees the vastness and the reality of the world just because it's real. Just because it's there. This phenomenon of seeing the reality of the world, because it's real, is not, please understand, this is not within the worldly context. This is a neshama quality. This is an element that comes from, so to speak, from the godly truth. Reality. It's true because it's true, not because it affects anything, not because it means anything to me. This is what I'm quoting all the time. There's much more to discuss in this, obviously. I'm just putting certain thoughts which we discuss all the time. I'm just alerting you to it as often as I can. That we have to, while we are here in the yeshiva and we are learning Torah, we have to get to the essence of what it's about, to the neshama of Torah, so that we can clearly see the contrast between the Torah view, the Jewish view, the neshama view of the world, and the worldly view of the world, the animalistic view of the world. The Rambam, I quote the Rambam all the time, which is something that each one of us should sort of reflect. The Rambam says, right in the beginning of his big sefer, that the basis of all wisdom is to know that there's a first being that brings everything into existence, and that all that exists is but a reflection of the truth of his existence. So this quote is a multifaceted. There's a lot of different things to focus on. One thing which I like that we should focus in, because this is the big contrast between the way we see the world and the way how the animals see the world and the way the world sees the world. And namely that there is a truth in the world. A truth means it is not merely something which is just caused by some other cause. There's a reality. The world reflects a reality. Like I pointed out, the human being, when he sees the world, when he opens his eyes and he sees the world, doesn't see cause and effect. He doesn't see apples and pears. He sees a reality. He sees way beyond that which is even accessible to him. Way beyond that which has any kind of practical relation to him. It says in Hasidus, and it's brought down in the Hayom Yom. Everybody knows the Hayom Yom. If you'll get familiar with it, this is a little booklet that has a quote for every day. So it says in Hayom Yom that one of the great kindnesses that Hashem did for the human being is that the human being, in the way he is structured, that he's standing up erect, on 2 feet up, and his head is up, will inevitably, as he's walking, will inevitably see the earth and the sky at the same time. In contrast to an animal that walks on 4, that naturally see the earth. The earth is the base for the animal. The base for the human being is reality. It's not earth, it's not sky, it's reality. So it's clear that there is much more to understand and to know in this arena, and I don't mean that we should, from this talk, get a full picture, a full insight about what Yiddishkeit is, what a Jew is, what a Neshama is, what Torah is. All I'm trying to point out is that there is a profound significance in everything that you learn. And it is incumbent upon us to seek to translate that significance on the personal level, and to see its contrast, to see how that affects our own view of the world, and to see how we can relate to it. Do I relate? Do I really understand it, or I don't understand it? Should I relate to the fact that the world was created by God, or I have to accept these words because that's what my rabbi told me to say? But as far as I'm concerned, I don't see God in the world. I see only the Big Bang. This is an important contrast, because ultimately we all have to, at some point in time, leave the yeshiva. At some point in time, with God's help, we're going to start building our own lives, and we want to build lives that are meaningful, that have meaning. We want to be able to, with God's help, to guide our children in a meaningful life. And if we don't relate to it, then we can't lie to our kids. Our kids are much smarter than we think. We can just tell them that, okay, once I told him, it's finished. And for our own sake, we have to bring out the difference. See, the problem is we don't understand the significance of this difference. The difference is not just one way of thinking, another way of thinking. The difference is, are we thinking with our neshama qualities, or are we thinking with our bodily qualities? Is the body the test for reality, or is the neshama the test for reality? Do we see with our hands, or do we see with our eyes, with our intellect? That is the key. That is the question. And the point is, Massey. It's a journey, which means we have to ultimately accomplish a categorical move away from a blind view of the world to a bright view of the world. From a strictly physical view of the world to a meaningful reality view of the world. Yes, sir. Let's.
I'm so sorry. I was going to ask you, you said our base is reality as opposed to the animals, which is sight. What does that mean, reality, in this case? Reality as we see it, understand it, or reality as it, I guess, is?
Let me try to give you a synopsis of the word reality in contrast to what we do. Okay. And we can go right into the heart of the scientific view of the world. The scientific definition of matter is that it occupies space, and it prevents any other piece of matter to share its space. Okay. This declaration that you cannot share my space with me, that brings me into existence. So that's the definition of my existence. In other words, my whole existence is, follow this, in contrast to something else.
Like the concept of independence?
What?
Like independent existence?
No, in contrast. The reason that, no, please listen. What gives this a presence, is the fact that you cannot occupy the same space that I do. So it's only in contrast to something else. It doesn't have its own reality. It's real in contrast to something else. If you want to put something in the same space, you cannot. Therefore, I exist. So what attests to the fact that I exist?
With your space.
Not I, the other guy. Right? The other guy attests that I exist. This is really the mentality of the world. What attests that I know what I'm talking about? If he agrees with me. That's what the way the world is structured. There is no inherent knowledge, inherent truth. It's all in contrast. Reality means there's reality. I live not because you agree that I live. I live because I live. I know myself that I live. I have all kinds of neshama experiences and insight that I know I live. I'm a living thing. And you do too. And if you have experiences and insights that I don't agree with, does not mean that you don't have them. Does not mean that they are true. That they are not true. This is such a reality. We, as I said, in sight, we have this union that we see the total reality. We see things not because of contrast, not because it have effect on us, but because they are real, the reality of the world. This is the unique quality of the human being, that Hashem has given the human being that capability. This is the soul, this is the intellect. In contrast, to the blind view, where you don't see anything through your intellect, you see only by experimenting. Where you're totally blind. You know, it's everything experimenting. Experiment, what is experiment? Relative to one thing, relative to the other. That's what an experiment is. There's no reality to it. The Torah insists, tells you right out in the very first line, God created the world, which means the world has a godly reality. And if the Torah says that the world cycle of time is 7 days, it is 7 days, whether we sense it or we don't sense it. And when Shabbos comes, it's Shabbos. Because the whole mitzvah of the world, the whole presence of the world, is based on the godly presence, not on the worldly presence, not on the Big Bang. There's infinitely more, and you can imagine, to talk about this. My point in this, in Massey, is to remind everyone that we have to make an effort to make a move, even as slight as it may be, but to make a move away from the Mitzrayim view to a Torah view. Even if it were one small inch, it's a move. But if you stay where you are and you just don't project what the Torah says, you have not gotten anything. Понимаем? Okay. Be well. This is it for today.